Number 5. Nanulak. Kicking this list off, we have a beast more terrifying than literally any other creature on this planet right now. Apparently this thing is real. Yeah. The apex predator. The top of the food chain. Twice interbred. This thing is a killing machine. The grizzly polar bear hybrid, aka the growler bear or the pizzly bear. Great names, great names. What do you like? I like the pizzly bear myself. It's the least aggressive. These two aggressive bears make up this rare hybrid that has occurred both in captivity and in the wild. So not only did they try this one in a lab, safe with test tubes, in nature this thing just evolved by itself and is just trucking around hunting as we speak. Yeah. That's horrifying. In 2006, the hybrid was confirmed by testing the DNA of a unique looking bear shot in the Northwest Territories on Banks Island in the Canadian Arctic. A hunter from Idaho reportedly shot a grizzly polar bear hybrid near Sachs Harbor in April with his local guide. They had been hunting for polar bears and killed the animal, believing it to be a normal find. Officials took interest in the creature after noticing that while it had thick white fur, it also had long razor-sharp claws, a humped back, a shallow face, brown patches on its body, and was almost twice the size, which are all traits of grizzly bears. Yeah. Yeehaw! DNA tests conducted by Wildlife Genetics International in British Columbia confirmed it was a hybrid with polar bear as a mother and a grizzly bear as a father. Yeah. Netflix campy horror, here we come. The number of confirmed hybrids has now risen to 8, all of them being children from the same female hybrid polar grizzly bear mother. There's only a couple of them. Yeah, thank God. Since the 2006 discovery, the hybrid has been referred to by several names including pizzly bear and the growler bear, but Canadian wildlife officials have suggested calling the hybrid bear Nanulak, taken from the Inuit names for polar bear and grizzly bear. Yeah, that's a sick name. That's a way better name. Let's go with that name, 100%. Number 4. The Culakamba. The Culakamba or Culakamba is an apparent hybrid species of chimpanzee and gorilla hybrid found and reported in Africa in the early 19th century. Although no empirical evidence has been found to substantiate the existence of the creature more than once, the Culakamba has been referenced in numerous times in some mid-19th century work and in some descriptive work from around 1860 to 1899 titled Explorations and Adventures in Equatorial Africa. The explorers refer to this unique ape hybrid as the Culakamba, based upon the description of words used by the First Nations people in the Ovenga River of West Africa. The people allegedly refer to the ape as Kulu because of its unique vocalization, unlike the sounds and abilities of other apes. Kamba is a word meaning, quote, to speak. Okay, that's terrifying. The local people, upon finding this hybrid creature, were saying that its name came from its ability to make sounds and talk, unlike any other species. The Culakamba is believed to be much larger with a flattened face, longer, larger skull, but more bipedal than a chimpanzee, meaning it walked on its legs much more like us. Although there has not been a documented sighting of the Culakamba since 1881, in 1996 a picture of an unusual looking ape was taken by Peter Jenkins and Liza Gadsby at the Cameroon Zoo, showing a seemingly hybrid ape that fit all the descriptions of the Culakamba, being supposedly that of a chimpanzee and gorilla hybrid. Could this be like a new form of sapien roaming our planet? Is this thing Bigfoot that the FBI is talking about? I don't know. What do you think? Number 3. Pythons. In the 1980s, a small number of pet Burmese pythons were released into Florida wildlife. Couple here, couple there, nothing crazy. Since then, these slithering snakes have started to wreak absolute havoc on wildlife and communities and have become something of a weird science project. A number of Burmese pythons running loose in the state of Florida are now officially a hybrid species, which could make them even more evolved than their other snake relatives. Scientists from the United States Geological Survey of the Everglades National Park analyzed skin and cell tissues from around 400 Burmese pythons that were captured in Florida between 2001 and 2012. The team wanted to learn more about the invasive species in order to better understand Florida's threat of the overgrowing population posed by wildlife and locals. Sure, the researchers expected to find only the pure genetic makeup of the Burmese python, coined the American alligator killer. It's quite the reputation. But according to the study, the number of interbred snakes with somewhat of a new genetic makeup started becoming more worrisome the more that they found. When two species come together, they have a unique set of generic traits and characteristics that they use for survival. This is made up of the environment around them. Indian rock pythons are smaller but much faster. Burmese pythons thrive in jungles and grassy marshes and are much bigger. Together, mixed with a little swap and spit, is this demon serpent. Yeah, the new and improved Floridian jungle croc annihilator. Again, cue campy Netflix movie, Croc Killer 5. I don't know, or something like that. When researchers involved in the new study analyzed samples found in Florida, they discovered that some animals assumed to be purebred pythons were also carrying new DNA, making a new rock python. Yeah, that's awesome. Couple of guys let their pets out and now there's snakes with double the abilities running around. Or slithering around, just by accident. This guy just rushed like a million years of evolution. Yeah. Thanks, Florida. Number 2. Beetlejuice. A living beetle-computer hybrid with legs that can be fully controlled by humans has been created by researchers in Singapore. I feel like that should have been on every newspaper in like 2016. Like, did you hear about this? Cause like I never did, you know? The beetle joins a long list of insects that have been turned into robots since the early 2000s. The others, of course, including hawk moths and cockroaches. None of those insects, however, had their walking speed, step frequency, and gait fully controlled by humans, making the Beetlebot the first of its kind. Okay, this thing is terrifying. I've seen what Sophia does with the AI that is capable over at Hanson Robotics. This thing's gonna be the next bug Terminator. Like, I feel like this is the prequel to Starship Troopers. Researchers apparently ran electrodes into the leg muscles in the beetle's first pair of legs and then stimulated movement by running currents through each other specific leg, Dr. Octavius style. The giant flower beetle, or Messionorina torcata, was then controlled via wires mounted onto the insect by Dr. Hirotaka Sato, an aerospace engineer, and his team from Nanyang Technology University in Singapore, tracking the beetle's motion with a 3D motion capturing system. They were then able to make the beetle gallop and walk alternating legs. First off, this is a little cruel, but also pretty cool. I didn't even know that bugs had muscles in their legs. The hybrid might prove a useful step towards building robots for use in disaster zones, where they could be equipped with cameras or microphones and navigated through tiny cracks to search for humans trapped under rubble. Okay, I like this thing all of a sudden again. Yeah, this is good. This is good news. Blending technology with the animal kingdom. Ant-Man and Wasp style. I like it. Due to the beetle still being alive, of course, humans would be able to switch from controlling the beetle to letting it navigate on its own way. When the insect-computer hybrid robot encounters an obstacle, the user can simply switch off the controller, allowing the neural control networks of the robot to overcome the obstacle. In doing so, the researchers can manipulate the different walking speeds, patterns, flying directions, and all other forms of the motion. Basically, it's playing PlayStation with a bug. And number 1, killer bees. Speaking of more creepy crawlies, we have these nasty things. The African honeybee, aka killer bee, is a hybrid produced originally by crossbreeding the East African honeybee with various of the European bees. First introduced in Brazil in 1956, 26 swarms escaped quarantine, and since then, this aggressive hybrid has spread throughout South America and North America by 1991. Yeah, that means before Pearl Jam was really going, there wasn't too many of these flying around. Once in a blue moon kind of deal. But time flies. Typically much more defensive than any other honeybee, these killer bees react faster and can chase a person a quarter of a mile. They kill about 1,000 people each year and even kill cows and horses. Although there are 29 recognized subspecies of bee, this seems to be the most aggressive. Biochemists have tracked down the brain chemicals that make killer bees so ferocious. It's the compounds which seem to be present in higher levels in the much feared Africanized honeybee, which makes less aggressive bees turn more fierce. That means that it can turn other insects into a more aggressive version of themselves. Honeybees are incredibly territorial, fighting to the death to defend their hive with multiple painful stings, but killer bees, the even crazier hybrids of the relatively docile strain, are more aggressive. Yeah, way more aggressive. Apparently these things are also really smart. Like, fish and bees are now able to communicate to each other. Do you know that? In a recent experiment done in Austria in 2019, using a robot translator, engineers from Swiss Federal Institute of Technology and 4 other universities are able to make the species able to transmit signals back and forth to each other, subsequently resulting in them demonstrating coordinated decisions. Yeah, Google it. Apparently these bees are so smart, they can signal underwater to fish. Yeah. We might not even need the controller for the bugs soon enough. Just when I thought the animal kingdom couldn't get even scarier, bees and fish are texting each other. Yeah.
Number 5 on this list is the humanzee. The humanzee, as you can imagine, is a human mixed with a chimpanzee. This is a very interesting entry on this list because whether or not it has actually been created or not is up for debate. Science Alert says a prominent US scientist has claimed researchers in Florida succeeded in breeding a human-chimp hybrid called a humanzee in controversial long-rumored 1920s research. Evolutionary psychologist Gordon G. Gallup Jr., who achieved renown for his pioneering mirror self-recognition experiments with animals in the 1970s, says a former university professor told him the hybrid creature was born at an animal research laboratory where he once worked. One of the most interesting cases involved an attempt which was made back in the 1920s in what was the first primate research center established in the US in Orange Park, Florida, Gallup told The Sun. They inseminated a female chimpanzee with human semen from an undisclosed donor and claimed not only that pregnancy occurred, but the pregnancy went full term and resulted in a live birth. There's little reason to think such an experiment successfully took place, and plenty of reasons to believe it didn't. But having an otherwise respected researcher make such a statement is drawing attention to this old rumor once again. It's definitely interesting to see a highly respected scientist in the community come out and make these claims like this. That does tend to carry a decent amount of weight and at the very least deserves to be investigated a little bit. It was also rumored that a few years ago some people came forward requesting government approval to do an experiment like this, but it was denied. So there's definitely been rumblings about an experiment like this before, but no definitive proof that it's actually taken place. To be completely honest, I do believe that something like this has went down. I just think that it may have happened behind closed doors, and we may not be privy to it. Like, this totally seems like something that the government could be interested in, but wouldn't want the public to find out about. Maybe in some secret base in some very low population part of the world, there is a human Z running around getting experimented on. Number 4 on this list is the human pig. So as we are going to see from this one, there are a lot of possible benefits from this, but also a ton of moral and ethical questions that pop up. Pagista says the first human pig hybrid embryo has been created in the lab, and it represents a major step forward in the field of regenerative medicine. This news comes from a team of researchers at the Salk Institute who were able to successfully grow human cells inside of a pig embryo for the first time ever. While this may sound like something out of a science fiction novel, the potential implications are actually quite significant. This achievement could one day lead to the creation of transplant organs for humans that are made from animal tissue. This would be an incredible breakthrough for those suffering from organ failure, as there would no longer need to be a wait for a human donor. Of course, there is still a long way to go before this technology is ready for clinical use. The next step will be to see if these hybrid embryos can develop into healthy adults. But even if that proves to be possible, it will be many years before we see anything like this being used in patients. So here is the thing with this. Yes, it would be awesome to be able to have a steady supply of usable organs to give to people who are suffering or need another one. So many people die from not having enough transplantable organs, and this is a problem that needs to be addressed. However, this also raises the question, what about the human pigs? These are going to be half-human creatures that are going to be bred for the specific purpose of having their organs harvested. This is clearly a very polarizing issue and something that people a lot smarter than me, they need to look into. Comment down below what you think about this potential innovation and how you think we should proceed. Number 3 on this list is the jag lion. Now, in all honesty, this is more cool than it is terrifying, but I still wanted to include at least one relatively cool thing on the list. Also too, if you did run into this thing in the wild, then I can promise you it would be very scary. So I think it still qualifies. Pagista says a jag-lion hybrid is a cross between a male jaguar and a female lion. The result is an animal with characteristics of both parent species, although it's usually more similar to the lion in appearance. Jag lions are not currently found in the wild, but several have been born in captivity. The jag lion was first created in 2006 when a male jaguar named Elvis was bred with a female lion named Lola at the exceptional animal park located in Phoenix, Arizona, USA. The two big cats mated successfully, and Lola gave birth to 6 healthy jag lion cubs. Since then, several other jag lions have been born in zoos around the world. These hybrids are not only interesting to look at, they also help scientists to learn more about the genetics of both lions and jaguars. So, like I said, this thing is really cool, but could also be very scary depending on where and how you run into it. In the zoo, where there's a large protective piece of glass between the two of you, not very scary at all. Totally cool. In the jungle, where there is no protective glass and this creature is very hungry, not cool, very scary. Good thing that there really isn't any of these creatures at the wild at the moment, so running into one outside of captivity would be very, very hard, but you never know. Number 2 on this list is the Wolfen, breeding one of the most intelligent creatures with one of the deadliest. Sounds like a great idea. That's what happened here with the Wolfen. Pagistus says, weird hybrid experiments usually make for interesting reading, and the Wolfen is no different. This unusual creature is actually a cross between a false killer whale and an Atlantic bottlenose dolphin, and was first discovered back in 1985. Since then, there have been several documented cases of Wolfens in the wild, and even a few captive ones as well. While they share many characteristics with both of their parent species, there are some notable differences that make the Wolfen truly unique. For one, they are typically smaller than either false killer whales or bottlenose dolphins, with an average length of just over 6 feet. They also have a more slender build, and their flippers are shorter in proportion to their body than either parent species. Interestingly, Wolfens also seem to exhibit social behaviors that are more similar to dolphins than whales. They are often seen forming close bonds with other members of their pod and engaging in activities such as surfing and playfully chasing each other around. It would be very rare to spot this creature in the wild, but be very careful if you do. Dolphins are super smart, and killer whales, well, they're killers. This is one of the most intelligent and also deadliest animals in the ocean, and therefore you need to tread carefully around it. And finally, number 1 on this list is the human mouse. The human mouse is another one of those ones with potential positives, but also lots of ethical questions. Pagistus says, in a first of its kind study, scientists have created a mouse embryo that contains human cells. The research published in the journal Nature could eventually lead to the development of new treatments for diseases using stem cells. To create the hybrid embryo, the researchers injected human stem cells into a mouse embryo. The human cells then began to grow and form structures that are found in the human brain and heart. The researchers say that the human cells were able to survive and grow because they were surrounded by mouse cells. This suggests that it may be possible to create hybrid embryos that contain a mix of human and animal cells. The study is still in its early stages, and it remains to be seen whether these hybrid embryos will be able to develop into healthy animals. However, the findings suggest that it may be one day possible to use stem cells from patients with diseases to create customized treatments. So yeah, again, tons of possible benefits for people who are going through some rough treatments right now, but also we're gonna have a mouse that's almost as smart as us humans acting as a test dummy for us. This is uncharted territory for humans, and understanding exactly how to go about it, it's something that we're going to need to discover along the way. Number 5 on this list is the aviator suit. Parachutes took a while to master, guys, and no one knows that better than Franz Reichelt. Mental Floss says if there's anything to be said for Franz Reichelt, it's that he had some supreme confidence in his own invention. In the early 1900s, Reichelt crafted a parachute from 320 square feet of fabric, all of which folded up into a wearable aviator suit. He had conducted several parachute tests using dummies, which all failed. He pinned the blame on the building, saying that they simply weren't tall enough. In 1912, Reichelt planned to test his latest version by flinging a dummy from the Eiffel Tower, but when he arrived at the famous landmark, the inventor surprised the waiting crowd by strapping on the parachute himself and taking the leap. The parachute didn't open, and Reichelt became a victim of his own invention. An autopsy reportedly determined that he of a heart attack on the way down. Imagine having the confidence to jump off of the Eiffel Tower using a so-called parachute that has literally never worked before. Number 4 on this list is the 10-cent beers. Alright, so this isn't really a science experiment at all, but it is an experiment of some kind. Mental Floss says in 1974, the Cleveland Guardians tinkered with a new promotion to increase game attendance, giving fans the opportunity to purchase an unlimited amount of beer for 10 cents a cup, which wasn't the best idea. The game against the Texas Rangers was an eventful one. Memorable events of the evening included a woman running into the Guardians on deck circle and flashing the umpire, a fan running onto the field and sliding into second base, and a father and son who ran onto the outfield and mooned the bleacher section. Things took a violent turn when fans launched fireworks into the Rangers dugout, and the whole thing eventually turned into an all-out riot. Fans against players on both teams. Players were hit with folding chairs, there were numerous fistfights, and some players were injured when they were pelted with rocks. After that, the Cleveland Guardians kept 10-cent beer nights, but limited the promotion to 2 drinks per person. So basically, humans and 10-cent beers do not go well in a public setting. I also looked it up with an inflation calculator, and even today, that would have been 60 cents a beer. Yeah, I can see how that could have been a problem. Number 3 on this list is the ape experiment. Yeah, you know, I didn't think it would take a rocket scientist to figure out that raising your kid among apes was a bad idea, but here we are. Mental Floss says in the early 1930s, comparative psychologist Winthrop Kellogg and his wife welcomed a healthy baby boy they named Donald. The psychologist had grown interested in those stories of children who were raised feral, but he didn't send Donald to be raised by wolves. He did the opposite. He managed to get his hands on a similar aged baby chimp named Gua and raised her alongside Donald. Gua initially did better than Donald in tests that included things like memory, scribbling, strength, dexterity, reflexes, problem solving, climbing, obviously, language comprehension, and more. But she eventually plateaued, and it became evident that no amount of equal treatment was going to make her behave more like a human. But when the Kellogg's ended the experiment, they did so abruptly and without much explanation, which is contrary to the meticulous records they otherwise took throughout the course of the study. While Gua wasn't showing any signs of picking up English, Donald had started to imitate the vocalizations of his sister from another species, so it's not hard to speculate why the Kellogg's called it quits. Guys, I'm all for having a pet, but when my kid starts acting more like the pet than me, that's where we need to call it, I think. Kellogg's felt the same way, and hopefully that will be the last time anyone ever tries something like this. Number 2 on this list is the soul experiment. So in all honesty, this one is pretty dumb in my opinion, but if it's actually accurate, then this would make for an incredible discovery. Mental Floss says in 1901, Duncan McDougall conducted experiments on extremely recently deceased people and dogs to see if their body weight changed immediately after. A decrease in weight, he theorized, would be indicative of a physical soul leaving the body. To test this theory, he weighed 6 people before and after their death, and concluded that there was a weight difference anywhere from half to 1.5 ounces. He repeated the experiment on dogs and found no difference, and therefore, by McDougall's reasoning, dogs have no souls. Other scientists have been critical of this experiment from day one, citing issues like small sample size and imprecise methods of measurement. Sounds like my dude Duncan was more of a cat person, honestly. I don't know, folks. It feels like there are a lot of holes in this experiment and not a whole lot of logic. Maybe it is accurate though, and we do have souls that weigh something. And finally, number 1 on this list is the Mental Floss says it's probably safe to say that an experiment falls into the gone wrong category when it may have been responsible for producing the As an undergrad at Harvard in the late 1950s and early 60s, Ted Kaczynski participated in a 3-year-long study run by Henry A. Murray that explored the effects of stress on the human psyche. After being asked to submit an essay about their worldview and personal philosophies, Kaczynski and 21 other students were interrogated under bright lights, wired to electrodes, and completely torn down for their beliefs. The techniques were intended to break enemy agents during the Cold War, and the students were never completely informed about the nature of the study. In short, the man who would eventually kill 3 people and injure over 20 more with his homemade was subjected to repeated psychological torture. Any experiment that ends up with this happening obviously went very wrong and never should have happened in the first place. People have a limit, and it seems like these experiments just pushed people way past them. Obviously, this is not an excuse for Ted's behavior in any means, but I'm sure that it was a big factor in making it happen.